Seattle. Welcome to Urban Forum Northwest. I am not Eddie Rye. I'm Kevin Henry. I'm substituting for Eddie Rye today. There is no substitute for Eddie, but I'm going to try my best. And I'm here in the studio with one live and living guest here, Bonnie Glenn, who we're going to get to in just a little while. Also here with my esteemed producer, Eric Ryder.
Good afternoon, Kevin.
Good to see you again. And want to remind you that Urban Forum Northwest is brought to you by Sound Transit's Diversity Program Office, the Port of Seattle's Office of Social Responsibility, and the Washington State Chapter of the National Association of Minority Contractors. So today we have an exciting program for you. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things. We're going to talk about how businesses can do their taxes the right way and stay out of trouble with the IRS, which is always a good thing. We'll be talking with Audrey Godwin, CPA and owner of Godwin and Associates. We will also be talking to employment recruiter Fancy Frenchwood about how businesses can add diversity to their workforce. And attorney Bonnie Glenn will talk about youth and law. It's a special forum that's taking place in Seattle later this month. We'll also hear from Jacqueline Moscow, the artistic director for the Langston Hughes Cultural Center. She's going to be talking about the African American Film Festival. And finally, we're going to have a conversation with Reverend Lim Charleston of the Martin Luther King Jr. County Justice for Trayvon Martin Committee. He's going to be talking about a march that is happening April 7th, which happens to be tomorrow. But first, that deadline, that I believe it's April 15th, maybe the 16th this year, if April 15th falls on a Sunday, but it's that deadline that everybody hates. It's the tax deadline, and a lot of people are scrambling around, getting their information together, thinking about their deductions and thinking about trying to get money back from the government instead of having to put money out. So on the line, we have Audrey Godwin. She knows all about taxes. It's a very taxing experience. Had to throw that in. You know, I was at H&R Block about 3 weeks ago with like 3 shoe boxes full of receipts, and it was very embarrassing trying to find what the accountant needed. And so I'm here to talk to you today about how can you avoid this kind of thing. So my first question is, do you have a lot of clients, Audrey, who are doing their taxes at the last minute, small business clients?
Well, yes. And part of it is trying to break them of that habit. Because a lot of small business owners are just in the throes of, trying to do business. And really what they need to do is set up systems. And with a lot of clients, especially those that are new to our firm, we just try to get them into doing things consistently. It could be something as simple as, please put your receipts in envelopes. It doesn't even have to get to the QuickBooks, because really if they show up with a bag full of receipts,
that's me. Or a shoebox.
Or a shoebox.
Okay.
A lot of times it's bags. Like they literally just throw stuff in bags and they come and we spend a little time and then I just kind of send them home with some guidelines on how to separate the receipts. Really, it's, we lose deductions. We lose the opportunity to take advantage of deductions because we are unorganized. Mm-hmm. And so really for a lot of people, especially small business owners, it's like just find the receipts, keep them every month. And a great tax deduction is to hire your kids. Pay them, $8 an hour. Or
how about your
grandkids?
grandkids?
Grandkids too, if they're old enough, if they can sort, give them really specific.
Well, I don't know. There's 7.
Yeah, that might be a little young.
Might be a little
sorting.
early for sort. One thing I did want to say is that my tip to people is to make sure your accountant is right near where you live. That way, you can rush out of the accountant's office and drive home like I did, and rummage through the shoebox first before you even take it back to the accountant.
Well, yeah, that would be a good idea. Or, some of my clients are further away than driving distance because I have clients across the country. But a lot of it is having just good communication with your accountant. What do I need? How can I set these systems up? And then, with me, when I have conversations with clients, I kind of figure out how they think. I deal with a lot of very creative people. So if I can just get them to comply with a very basic system, at the very least, they get to see the following year the results, the fruit of having been organized enough for me to get really good information for us to reduce the tax liability as much as possible.
Okay, and that's one thing I want to talk about are deductions. You know, there's the right deductions, and then there's those deductions that you probably shouldn't try to take. So maybe you could just remind small businesses of what are some of those deductions that maybe they don't think about throughout the year.
And so here's the thing with the tax code, right? Because the tax code says that if you're in business, anything that is considered an ordinary and necessary cost of doing business is a deductible tax expense. And so it's really challenging to say, well, here's the list of business deductions. I mean, we have some basic ones, right? We have rent, we have utilities, we have office supplies, marketing, we have promotion, we have meals and entertainment, and the reason why meals and entertainment is a great one is because we probably go out to coffee and we talk with, potential clients, potential strategic partners, and those coffee dates that people do quite often are deductible, and all you really have to do is put the person's name that you met with and the reason why you met with them. And what I find is that people don't want to do that documentation, so they won't claim the deduction.
Now, I have a question, and I'm not trying to be silly, but would cocktails constitute as a deduction if you're having drinks discussing business?
It's called meals and entertainment. So it would be cocktails, it would be coffee, it would be meals, it would be tickets to a game, to the opera, to an art exhibit. That's entertainment. And if you're doing it for the express purpose of business development or as a client gift, those are the things that absolutely we want to take advantage of. But again, it's making people need to do the documentation. It's just, who did you give the tickets to, and are they a client? Are they a potential client? Is it a strategic partner? It's part of business development. So we need to make sure that we're doing at least that basic.
Okay.
The other one would be mileage.
Right.
People are constantly estimating. And one of the things I tell people is, get your beginning of the year odometer reading and your end of the year odometer reading, and then keep your calendar all year long. Because if you ever have to recreate the mileage log, the best way to do that is from your calendar. And people miss deductions for their mileage because they just think of the big things. They forget that they've driven to the bank to make a deposit, or gone to Office Depot or Staples to pick up office supplies, or have gone and run a bunch of different errands on their way to the client's office in order to make that. So that's a deduction that we could definitely shore up and make a lot better for the business owner.
We're speaking with Audrey Godwin, CPA and owner of Godwin & Associates in the beautiful city of Renton, correct?
Yes.
And we're talking about getting your taxes together and then also doing things throughout the year in order to be prepared so that when you do go in to talk to your accountant, you're not like me with shoe boxes and driving home in a frenzy trying to get everything together. So one question I had was about nonprofits. Someone had asked me about, she's responsible for running nonprofits and working with that industry. What are some of the things they should keep in mind?
Well, nonprofits are a whole different ball of wax. And so, they have to keep very accurate books and records. And so it's really important that they have an accounting system in place because they have to report. So the executive directors or CEOs of the nonprofits have to report to the board of directors, and they have to have monthly financial statements. And so that becomes more critical. So they, first and foremost, need to have a formalized accounting system. Even if they're just using QuickBooks, they have to have an accounting system in place because their board of directors are have a fiduciary responsibility to the organization.
What other just parting tips would you give to businesses in terms of, when it comes to taxes? I mean, I know that you as a business owner yourself have other fields of expertise. And in fact, maybe you could just mention a few other areas that you also work with small businesses in.
Sure. I do a lot of chief financial officer work, and so that's really financial coaching. So how do we get financial systems in place that allow for cash flow to be spent to move your company into the direction that you need it to move in for personal financial goals as well as business financial goals. But the tax piece is just something we integrate into that financial coaching and counseling because we need to manage the tax piece if we want to grow the company. So really, this time of year for business owners, I recommend first take a deep breath. This date comes every year, and so maybe it's not a surprise to most of us. It does become for business owners because we get very focused on doing the work of the business for the new year, and we really need to make sure that our financial systems are in order so that we can get our taxes done and really spend a majority of our energy focusing on growing and managing a really great company for the current year. So what I would say is, 1, take a deep breath. 2, if you're behind, commitment this year to decide that you're going to get your finances in order, because it'll definitely give you peace of mind to know end of this year whether or not you're making your financial commitments as well as managing the tax liability. So then it'll make next tax season very easy for you. And if you're going on extension, why not make it a commitment to not only get last year, 2011, done and put to bed quickly, but get 2012 up to date as quickly as possible.
I was just wondering if you had, and you don't have to mention names, of course, if you had the most bizarre client in terms of doing their taxes that you've ever come across, or just one of those stories that you like to tell over cocktails, while you're deducting the expense because it's a business-related thing.
Exactly. Well, and you realize taking your accountant to a dinner or cocktails is always a write-off. That's always a good thing. So one bizarre story. I think the most bizarre was the year that I actually had a client who brought all of their receipts in a pizza box. And so literally my office smelled like pizza.
Oh.
Yeah, they couldn't find anything else to dump their receipts in, and so they brought it to me in a pizza box. And I thought, wow, it's bizarre. And so kind of the comment was, well, you could take this back and sort it, but if I have to sit here and smell this, then I might have to triple your bill just because I have to sit with this. And the funny thing is that we sat for 2 hours and went through everything. And the following year, he managed to bring it in a 24 Pepsi case box. So it was not food the following year. Most bizarre because, I've been dealing with them for a number of years, and they still just have decided that the best way to do it is just to sort receipts in my office for a couple of hours instead of just trying to get stuff together. So they're kind of always behind, but it's challenging and it's stressful for them. But until they're really ready to make a change, there's not a whole lot that I can do other than just try to calm them down.
So finally, last question, red flags, those things that you just don't even want to think about trying to deduct.
So here's the thing. There's this big misconception that there's big red flags. If everything that you put on your tax return ends in a 0, it looks like a guess. So try not to guess. Try to be as, accurate as possible. But that's usually where the red flags are. In a year where maybe you make $10,000 of income, but you have $50,000 of expenses, if a lot of that is startup expenses, then, that could be a red flag. I think a lot of it is, if you're going to get audited, it could be a home office deduction. It could be that your meals and entertainment are out of line for your industry. It could be just that, some of the numbers in comparison to what's normal for your industry may be out of whack. But if you have all your receipts in place and your documentation, then, an audit's really nothing to be scared of.
Got it. Okay, before we let you go, if you wanted to give out your website or phone number or...
Oh, sure. You can find me on the web at thegodwingroup.net or even on Facebook at The Godwin Group, and my phone number is 425-282-6915.
Okay, thank you very much for being on Urban Forum Northwest.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, see you later.
All right.
And we will be back after a commercial break here with Fancy Frenchwood talking about diversity recruiting here on Urban Forum Northwest. I'm your host, Kevin Henry.
You, sir, are a constant complainer.
Not
another radio commercial.
Especially when it comes to driving to work.
Only thing worse than today's traffic was yesterday's.
Yet as much as you complain, traffic will never get any better.
I'm a hamster caught in a wheel inside a circle within a maze.
Meet the voice of reason.
I'm the voice of reason, sweetie.
Well, I'm the voice of, hey, knucklehead, quit driving 40 in the passing lane.
Ride Sound Transit and you can kick back and relax on your way to work.
What would I complain about then?
How about the weather?
This winter was a rainstorm locked in a shower inside a downpour trapped in a freezer.
Listen to the voice of reason.
Hello, sunshine.
Ride Sound Transit and save. For details, visit soundtransit.org. Sound Transit. Ride the wave.
Looking for fare and scheduling information? Listen to The Voice of Reason and visit our new website and trip planner at soundtransit.org.
Small businesses help sustain our region's economy. That's why the Port of Seattle provides equal access and opportunity to all small businesses owned and operated by minorities, women, and the disabled. To provide professional or personal services or contract for small works projects, you should register on both the Port's Consultants roster and Small Works roster. You can also make Port buyers aware of your products and services by registering on the Small Business roster. It's free and easy. For more information, just go to portseattle.org and look for the links under Business. That's portseattle.org. The Port of Seattle, where a sustainable world is headed.
1150kknw.com, your connection to Alternative Talk, 1150 AM.
And welcome back to Urban Forum Northwest. I am not Eddie Rye. I am Kevin Henry, guest hosting for Eddie, and he'll be back in a week or two. Next on the line here on Urban Forum Northwest is Fancy Frenchwood, and I call her a diversity recruiting expert. She has a career that goes back to working at Boeing and being on numerous diversity councils and working in the area of recruiting diversity to the workforce. That's such an important issue nowadays with the demographics here in the Puget Sound changing so rapidly that your business should really reflect the community that you're serving. So that doesn't come without its challenges, though, when sometimes you look at your workforce and you're thinking, well, how is it that I can, go about, what method should I choose in order to try and connect with diverse populations so that they will apply for a particular job or positions at my company. So thanks for being on the show, Fancy.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Yeah, so one question I had for you to start things off is, what are some of the methods by which a company can find who they're looking for? Because sometimes businesses will say to me, we want people of color to work here, but we just can't seem to find them.
Right. Well, there's a couple of tools that I like to use. One is meetup.com, and the other is LinkedIn. And using both of those platforms as a means of recruiting diversity in the workplace, you can simply search by group, which is a great thing because it allows you to go in and see when you search for, let's say you have a particular demographic that you're lacking in your organization, you can go search meetup.com and find groups that will that where the members will be of that specific demographic that you're looking for. So that's one way to do it. LinkedIn is another way. And what I think, using LinkedIn probably from a passive standpoint in terms of your company and its branding message, I think it's important to share updates that reflect your organization as one of inclusion. And so that's kind of a passive way, obviously, that, the only people that are going to see that are people that are following your company or looking at your company. But from an active standpoint, you can certainly go in and search groups. And that's a great way to get your message out there for your company. So if you're on LinkedIn.com and you search for a group, let's say, for me, I'm recruiting technology specialists. So I can go on there and look for Hispanics in technology, for example. And I can join that group and then share my messages with that group. So that's a great active way to use. And meetup.com is a similar thing. There are tons of social networks, professional networks that use meetup.com. And, maybe I'm looking for, I have a ton of gaming roles, for example, right now. And let's say there's a company that has let me know, we really want to see, Hispanics among our workforce. I can go on meetup.com and look for the same thing, Hispanics in technology, Hispanics in gaming, And those are some active ways that you can do that.
Well, and you mentioned inclusion, and you mentioned that perception that somebody will have of a particular company. I know that sometimes I play this little game where I go on websites and I start counting the diversity, or in terms of the number of photos that I see of employees or customers, in terms of do they reflect diversity, and immediately I get, whether or not the company is a great company or not, immediately I get this more of a kind of emotional response about, well, wow, there's nobody there that's African American, there's nobody there that's Hispanic or Asian or anything like that. And I'm thinking, do they really want my business? And do you find that a lot of businesses just don't think about that, or is it that nobody's telling them they should do that, or what's the issue with that?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And a lot of times I don't think businesses are as active as they should be in creating that branding message that they are an organization that is all-inclusive. And so I think businesses and companies have to take a more proactive approach to letting the public know, that not only do we want your business, as a consumer, but also that we want, people that look like you, act like you, sound like you, or reflect some particular demographic, that we have to show those images so that people feel comfortable applying to jobs at a company.
And I was just going to say, I even pay attention to the hold music, when they say, please hold.
Sure, exactly.
And if I hear something that's just, everybody's got their own taste. But I think if you can give me something that seems to reflect, again, that sense of, global, goodness or diversity, I think that means a lot sometimes. And so much of this stuff is subliminal, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I can tell you as a former Boeing employee that it took Boeing tons of lawsuits, and it typically does. Companies are reactive versus being proactive. And, after learning that, after being sued a few times, they've learned, okay, we need to create a brand that reflects, that we are an inclusive organization, that we want people of all different walks of life. And now if you go to the Boeing website, for example, you'll see the diversity reflected not only in their who their consumers are, their airline customers, but also in their workforce.
Mm-hmm. Now
but again, that's because they've suffered through those lawsuits.
It's kind of a painful lesson, right? Well,
yes.
I remember when Denny's got sued, years and years ago, and then I started going in there all the time because I walk in and they gave me like the VIP treatment.
Exactly.
Because they didn't want me to sue them,
Right, right.
But I did want to ask you about this whole social media thing. I love social media, but at the same time, it can be very overwhelming, can be very time-consuming. So like you mentioned, meetup groups and LinkedIn and Facebook, and Twitter and some of the ones that I'm familiar with, there's at least every other day there's a new one that seems to pop up that somebody wants me to join. I'm thinking, my inclination is, okay, yeah, I want to join this, but then I'm thinking, well, how much time is it going to take me? I'm a member of these 9 different groups now, and I'm tweeting and linking in and
right.
meeting up and all this stuff, and I'm not getting any work done. So how do you balance all that?
That's a great question, and there are a multitude of productivity tools available that allow you to sort of consolidate some of your posts or some of your interaction. For example, one that I use frequently is Hootsuite, and using Hootsuite, I'm able to post to Twitter, LinkedIn, and my Facebook all at once, and I can schedule those tweets. For example, I can schedule those quotes. So if I spend 20 to 30 minutes in the morning scheduling out my posts. And then, of course, you definitely don't want all of your posts to be scheduled. You want some things that are happening in the moment as you're sharing, what you're doing so that people are feeling like they're getting to know you and things like that. But, some of them, like my job orders that I have, for example, I can schedule those so that I'm not spending all day, going back to Twitter to post a job. If I schedule it out, it's done for me. So that's just one productivity tool. There are a number of others that are available. I did a webinar with a friend of mine the other day, and we talked about Evernote. Evernote's another great way to increase your productivity while using your social media. Because we can't ignore it. It's here. But like you said, there are so many of them.
It's a very useful tool, and I live and breathe it every day. I just think that, to go back to your point about inclusion and perception, I know that working in Bellevue, there's a certain perception of Bellevue. And when you're trying to hire people and you're trying to get them to, invest their time or apply for jobs, that kind of Bellevue stigma kind of comes up. of like it being just basically, 95%, rich white folks, basically, which is way far from the truth. So I'm just saying that it just seems like companies just need to be aware of the fact that others might be perceiving them different than they perceive themselves.
Absolutely. And that's where it's really important to make sure that you've got the right person tasked with that challenge, with branding your company for you. And, for example, being a social media manager for a couple of different clients, that's one thing that you really have to, when you're managing a Facebook for a company or a Twitter, sharing messages that make everyone feel like their voice is kind of reflected. So if you're sharing a news article, for example, and you're in Bellevue, you might share something that I think I remember last year there was a Polynesian cultural event that you were promoting. But doing those kinds of things where everyone can see that they're reflected. And it's funny that you said that about Bellevue, because that is the perception. But I recently learned that Bellevue has one of the largest Asian populations in the state of Washington.
28%. Yeah, I mean, it's over one in, it's almost 1 in 3 people. And a lot of that has to do with Microsoft and the tech industry and a number of reasons. But it's just, important for people to have a more realistic picture of Bellevue. But I'm going to have to let you go. However, I wanted you to give out, if you had a website, phone number, email address, let us know how to get in touch with you. Fancy
Thanks,
Frenchwood.
Kevin. You can follow me at Fancy Frenchwood on Twitter. And I'm also I have a blog, fancyfrenchwood.com. And you can email me, fancy@fancyfrenchwood.com.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being on Urban Form Northwest.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Okay. You have a great day. Okay. And now we're going to go over to sitting to my left and to your right is Bonnie Glenn. She is a adjunct professor at Seattle University in the field of law, and she is currently the director of, trying to read the writing here.
Yeah, the director of the Community and Parole for JRA, which is the Juvenile Rehabilitation Administration.
That's great. You said it better than I ever could have.
Well, there you go.
You have very small writing. Well, we're here. I've known Bonnie for years, and we're here to talk about a youth and law forum that's taking place. And with the Trayvon Martin case being in the news, and with so many shootings and things happening with today's youth, it's so important, as we both discussed off the air, to get information to our youth, as well as their parents and adults, about the legal system. So I want to hear all about this forum, and so I'll just kind of let you roll with it.
Oh, well, we're very delighted to be here this afternoon. The Youth and Law Forum was started in 1990, and so over 20 years, we've been able to bring together partnerships with not only the legal system, people who are part of that system in the community, to come together to help prevent and intervene, to prevent more youth coming into our criminal justice systems. So partners like prosecutors, defense attorneys, NAACP, community organizations, our law enforcement. We've been very fortunate to have wonderful cooperation with the Seattle Police Department, the King County Sheriff's Office, and others, as well as other organizations from like the Richard Allen Brotherhood, our Greek, African-American Greek organizations, Zeta Phi Beta, a.k.a. Deltas, and our law school partners. It's just been a really great collaborative to come together to help talk about these tough issues.
And so you're talking about the issues, and what's the format? So if somebody wants to go, what should they expect to see?
Well, what's nice about this is that it's a chance also for fun as well as learning about the law all at the same time. So one of the things that we do is that we're fortunate that we've had heads of agencies and so forth come to give people a chance, the youth as well as the community, to meet some of those folks. So it could be the elected officials as well. We've had many of those. And we do it in a fun format. It's like a bingo game. They've got to find people who are actually prosecutors, who are judges, who are people within the system. Once they get a chance to really get their feet wet with that, we also do things is talking about really the law. Oftentimes we can start with a skit, and we can show how in reality something that starts out as a joyride that can end up to something a lot more critical. And so we do that in a fun format. But when you finish, you really look at the reality of, here's someone who has, we're acting on the stage about someone being pulled over, but they're real life issues every day, like a youth in the car. Hey, I'm just getting in the car, and maybe someone stole the car. You got someone with an open can of container. Next thing you know, and also how people's attitudes and reactions at the time of an incident can take something that's minor all the way to something completely different.
And I wanted to stop you right at that point because I was visualizing, kids are out having fun. They're not paying attention to what's going on. They don't know that their friend, stole the car and that kind of thing. What type of advice would you give to, your average 18-year-old, 17-year-old that's out with his friends? Just, if they do get pulled over or if they're in a certain situation, what can they be aware of? Because, I personally have a 19-year-old son who's gotten involved in a few things where when he went out that night, he didn't expect to get into. But it was, I think, his lack of awareness of his surroundings and things like that really contributed to him kind of getting in these rather, difficult situations.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things we're going to be having at this particular forum coming up on April the 21st is talking about cyber safety, talking about these various issues of what you do with law enforcement. We're very fortunate, like our Noble chapter, which is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement, will be there. And so some of the things I know that they will be sharing as well is that when you're stopped for some reason, or if you're in a car, what would you do in that particular situation when, if in fact you're contesting something, when do you do that? Well, one of the first tips is not at that time. If you believe you've been wrongly stopped, things like that, and, tempers can flare, there's certain things that you can do, which is to get the license plate of the vehicle that's been driven by the officer, the badge number, things like that, in order to make sure, as much as things are happening, that you're keeping track and to make sure you can bring that information at that appropriate time. Often things, how you react to things at that time can escalate very quickly. So be very careful. Also about really your own personal things that you are doing for yourself as far as how do you keep your emotions under check when things happen. Very hard to do in reality, but at the same time also the people you're around. What do you do with that? Oftentimes a lot of our juveniles get into trouble because, they skipped school, they went in the car with somebody else, or they walked, they ended up because they were idle, and next thing something else they're involved in. So we would say to the youth to make sure that first who you're hanging around and some of the things that they're doing. Be aware of your circumstances. We use different scenarios, whether it's someone, gives you something to put in your locker. You don't know what it is. Next thing is some controlled substance, things like that. Whole different type of incident.
And this is happening, by the way, so I don't forget to say this, at the MLK Fame Community Center.
That's correct.
The Youth and Law Forum, Saturday, April 21st. And then what time is that?
It's from 8 to 2,
okay,
so 8 a.m. to 2.
So it's rather involved. It's a 6-hour kind of deal there.
Well, and you know what? We break up into different workshops for different age groups. So we have something for adults. We're going to have something about school and education, a lot of the suspension policies and things like that, and truancy prevention. How do you help prevent and understand that? A fun session is going to be the cyber safety. You were just talking about social networking.
Right.
Wow. The issues today with our young people.
Well, and the whole cyber situation is, and maybe you can even answer this question. To me, I guess my motto with the internet is that I will never put anything in an email or a photograph that on the internet, in any context or format, that I wouldn't have a problem with the whole world seeing. And I'm just amazed sometimes when, especially youth in particular, do these things on YouTube, and then it's in YouTube, then it goes viral, and then there's embarrassing pictures of, with the kid's head in a keg, and there seems to be general surprise that, oh my goodness, the whole school saw that text that I sent. Yeah. So what do you tell kids about that? We
tell the young people to make sure whatever you actually put out in a text actually is public. Is no matter what, it can come back. True life incidents, someone texts someone in a time when, you'd say, I'd beat you up, and then you have these texts, and the next thing it escalates. That's a whole written record of a transcript that's happening with regards to something that normally in a schoolyard, you and I would be talking back and forth,
right,
and it may dispel, but there's a whole record of what's happening with that. And also with social networking, who are you really talking to? You don't really even know. Also pictures.
Well, it could be somebody posing as somebody else.
Absolutely.
Very often.
So you think that's happening, and next thing really who's online is somebody else, an older person, a predator.
Well, yeah, and there's a show, Dateline, I think it was, or Chris Hansen, or To Trap a Predator kind of thing. And so is that something that's just increased, where people showing up thinking they're meeting somebody who's 20, it turns out it's a 40-year-old man or something?
Things like that happen every day, and it's sad, but it's the reality. But it's true, and the more we can educate our young people and adults about that happening. One of the tips last year, of course, you wouldn't think that we do this, but never give out your real email. A lot of people use their own name in their email.
Right.
And so
Right.
you should come up with something different.
And identity theft can happen as a result of that. We're speaking with Bonnie Glenn, and she is an adjunct professor, among many things, at Seattle University, and currently the director of Division of, what's that writing again?
Oh, that one?
Read that again.
It's of JRA.
It looks like shorthand.
You
And
do.
JRA stands for what?
It's a
for our
juvenile,
listeners.
It's our Juvenile Rehabilitation Administration.
Okay, so you encourage both parents and youth to participate in this. And one thing I did want to ask you, because we're sitting here talking about how, youth, teenagers get involved in things, and, when they got up in the morning, they never thought they'd wind up in juvenile hall or something like that. Do you find that there's this sense of being invulnerable or something that sometimes kids have? Because they do these things and you're going, what in the world were you thinking? And they're, wow, yeah, well, I didn't think I'd get hurt, jumping off a 2-story building or whatever. Is there something that you think creates that in youth, that they think, I'm not going to get hurt or nothing bad is going to happen to me?
Gosh, it's really tough, because what happens is people are going along and they're not thinking right. And they get in situations and then they get scared and they don't know what to do. And so one of the things is, once it happens, is hopefully that they have a support network around them, or people in ways in which they can reach out, because we, like ourselves, all of us have made decisions, that we're poor. But once they do, what do we do with it, and how do we help make it right? And sometimes it's hard and they're frustrated to do that. So it's tough. It's an impulsive time, especially the teenage years, where a lot of the crimes occur between those ages of 14 and, 17. Those are the major areas of crimes.
Do you ever find that when you have these youth in law forums, and you've had other ones,
Correct.
do you ever find that youth some will wind up wanting to go into law enforcement or some area as a result of getting this new knowledge about how the system works?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things we also have is we have tables in the back and people who talk about careers in the law, because part of this also is to acclimate people to one another and to see, in fact, I could do that. I could be a court reporter. I could be an attorney. I could be a judge. I could be a law enforcement officer. I can be someone in the community advocating, or a defense attorney on behalf of young people or in the law. And we need more people in all of those areas. And it's a nice mix of all of that together.
Now, with the Trayvon Martin case and other shootings, there was a shooting where the 9-year-old shot the 6-year-old little girl that was in Harborview. Do you find that society or the public, they get like that awareness gets raised and people want to have meetings and forums and the media starts covering the issue, and then things kind of start to die down again?
Yeah, it is. I think what happens is, obviously the media, things happen, and then it escalates, and then people think about it, and then they're like, well, what can we do more from that? And then another incident happens. And so one of the reasons also for this forum is to hopefully get people to collaborate, too, before incidents like that happen, more so, because sometimes it's on the burner just for a little bit. But how do we help, whether it's a crosswalk situation that we had not that long ago or something else?
The crosswalk situation, what was that?
That was the one, I think, where we had, there was an incident down in Rainier, and then somebody was crossing in the crosswalk, and then you stopped the person, and so it escalated into something else. And so a lot of community outcry and things like that occurred, and how do we best handle situations? And so it's some of the things that we just talked about, more knowledge about the law, ways to better outreach when situations like that occur, things like that. Or just like you're saying in the case you talked about with someone taking a backpack, a gun in it, someone's getting shot. What do we do with that situation? Luckily it doesn't happen very often, but how can we better help? That's about making sure guns are locked up, things like that.
Well, there was another story about some kids took a gun to school and they were just showing it off. It didn't go off, but it was just the idea of and that goes under the what were you thinking category, because I'm thinking, okay, take a gun to school. There's nothing good that can happen from that.
Right.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
Especially like going to school. It's not like you're defending yourself. You're in a rough neighborhood or something like that. So this is on April 21st from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the MLK Fame Community Center at 3201 East Republican Street in Seattle. And one of the big sponsors is the First AME Church. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And they've been the founder of this whole thing.
Since
along with
1990.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I want to thank, we're going to go to a break here, but I wanted to thank Bonnie Glenn for taking the time out to come to the studio here, live and in person. And what are you showing me here?
And then also for more information?
Oh, for more information, go to fameseattle.org. Is that good?
That's it.
Okay.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
All right, it's been a pleasure here. We'll be right back with more from Urban Forum Northwest and Jackie Moscow from the Langston Hughes Cultural Center right after these messages.
Small businesses help sustain our region's economy. That's why the Port of Seattle provides equal access and opportunity to all small businesses owned and operated by minorities, women, and the disabled. To provide professional or personal services or contract for small works projects, you should register on both the Port's Consultants roster and Small Works roster. You can also make Port buyers aware of your products and services by registering on the Small Business roster. It's free and easy. For more information, just go to portseattle.org and look for the links under Business. That's portseattle.org. The Port of Seattle, where a sustainable world is headed.
You, Missy, are way too grumpy for your age.
You know, people do call me names like Krabby McCrab, Not Enough Fiber, and Cranky Katie, which is kind of annoying since my name is Lauren.
Maybe it's because you are always cranky.
You're right. And it's usually after my drive to work. One time, I planted a jelly donut on someone's head for not making coffee.
Talk to the voice of reason.
Hello, precious. Ride Sound Transit and relax. It's a cleaner, greener way to go. Plus, you probably have fewer nicknames.
Or maybe I'd have names like Sparkles, Sweetie Pie Face, or Happy Go Lauren.
Keep chasing that dream, dear.
Listen to the voice of reason.
Smile, sweetie.
Ride Sound Transit and save. For details, visit soundtransit.org. Sound Transit. Ride the wave.
Listen to the voice of reason. Save time, money, and the environment by taking Sounder to select Mariners games. Visit soundtransit.org for details.
For the people, by the people. Alternative Talk, 1150 AM.
And welcome back to Urban Forum Northwest. And wanted to remind you that I'm not Eddie Rye. I think you probably figured that out. I'm Kevin Henry, and I'm guest hosting for Eddie this week and probably next week, too, depending on what Eddie thinks of this show. Right, Eric? So I wanted to remind you that this is brought to you by Sound Transit's Diversity Program Office, the Port of Seattle's Office of Social Responsibility, and the Washington State Chapter of the National Association of Minority Contractors. And on the line, we have Jackie Moscow. She is the director of the Langston Hughes Cultural Center. And there's an African-American film festival coming up, right, Jackie?
Yes, there is.
And I want to hear all about it.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Yes, Jackie Moscow, the artistic director, and it's Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center. And we're going to go into our 9th annual African-American Film Festival, April 14th to the 22nd of April. 9 days of about 40 films, shorts, narratives, documentaries, animation. Our film festival is by and about Black people from all over the globe, so you'll see things as far away as, Africa and Germany to right here in your own backyard, where we have a very nice relationship with some of our local filmmakers, and a lot of the things that you can see just take place right here. I think the most exciting thing, along with the fact that it's a fabulous film festival, is that Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center, which has been under renovation for the last 2 years, and we've been doing programming off-site, is now reopening. And that film festival, people will have the first opportunity to be in our wonderfully renovated space to welcome you into that. And that alone is, come on down April 14th. It's difficult to pick out films, but usually I always talk about opening night and closing because we bookend our films. Those are larger events with a reception. We always have filmmakers there, and our opening night is actually a film called The Last Fall, and it's a very provocative film. It's actually made by Matt Cherry, who is an ex-football player, and when he got hurt and could no longer play football, he made this film about that and what takes place there. And, of course, we'll have Matthew Cherry, an up-and-coming filmmaker, with us, and a panel where we'll have sports people on hand and psychologists so that we can really talk about what does it really mean, especially in the African-American community where sports is often seen as a way out. And there are many, many problems that go along with that that illusion and sometimes delusion. And so that's, like I say, if you kick off the festival with us on April 14th, then you'll definitely want to stay all the way through until we get to the closing, which is a film called Restless City that premiered in Sundance. And it's a film that talks about the culture of, in this case, Senegalese, but the African culture that's taking place in New York City, and, you know, how vibrant it is, and how just on the edge of, you know, violence it is, and how on the edge of just absolute, you know, genius and creativity it is. And it's under the radar, and for me, it's a kind of a metaphor of what the African American community was, you know, in terms of it had an entire culture there that was under people's radar. It was not yet assimilated into American society, and there was not as much of a divide between, you know, the haves and the have-nots within our community. So for me, watching this film, it's not only just, you know, supporting artists from around the globe, it's also, the discussion is like, where are the crossovers and where are the dissimilarities, and, you know, what can we actually learn from this, and what can they actually learn coming into our facility. And again, on that night, we will have one of the actors and the executive producer.
And what's the closing night again? Sorry.
The closing night is the 22nd. So it's opening the 14th and the closing on the 22nd. Lots of stuff in between. We have a ladies' night with
a ladies' night. So
we have a ladies' night where it was like good hair and dubious distinctions, and Ebony Goddess, Queen of Il-Ae, and just some really great films that would really appeal to women. We also have an interesting evening that we're trying this time. It's the first time, and it's a 9 o'clock showing, a late night showing. And again, off the top of my head, I don't actually see it here.
Is it My Last Day Without You?
It could very well be that. And that's the one where we're saying to the audience, you know, we talk back as people, so come on and talk back to the film.
Talk back to the... Well, that brings back memories. That brings back memories of as a kid going to the theater where people were talking to the screen.
Absolutely. Well, this is a night where you can come and nobody's going to turn around and say, don't do that. And it's actually on Saturday night at 9 o'clock, and it's two guys at the back of the theater, and it's an audience talk back. So we'll have lots of snippets of other films like Uptown Saturday Night, Sparkle, Do the Right Thing, Talk Out Loud, and just black classics that we can actually just get behind and remind ourselves.
Well, you just brought up something really interesting, because you said black classics, and I remember Uptown Saturday Night, and I remember Sparkle, and I think I had a crush on Irene Cara at one point. But
you and everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. But what I'm thinking, it feeds into my next question about black films getting enough recognition. I think sometimes when I've said the word black classic to somebody who's really unfamiliar with a lot of the films produced by black people, I get this, oh, you're talking about Superfly. You know, and I'm just wondering, what are some of the distortions about black films, just even historically, you know, and because it doesn't seem like they get enough recognition.
Well, I mean, that, of course, is an across-the-board 400-year history.
And we only have 3 minutes, right?
Right, so we have 3 minutes. So basically, the difference between the Superfly, which are considered the blaxploitation films, which was a whole genre that came out in the 70s and actually saved Hollywood. We did a whole festival on documentaries on blaxploitation films. But black classics along, you know, like Uptown Saturday Night, we had a lot of filmmakers that were in the 60s and the 70s, and actually we were trying to remember the ones in the 30s that came out with an incredible amount of films that touched on everything from politics to love to, you know, comedy and just anything that you could think about. And they were very vibrant and very rich, and we had a lot of people that we brought along with that. And I call that being in control of the cultural wealth of your culture. That's where Langston Youth Performing Arts Center, that's where the black leadership in the arts is actually coming, that we have to find ways to do exactly what you say, not just list up what we've been, but start taking control of actually where we're going, because your culture is your wealth. spiritually, and economically. There's economic development in having our own cultural wealth.
Oh, absolutely.
So
yeah.
it's important to support because we don't have that many institutions anymore. So we do programming year-round. This is just a film festival, but we do plays and music and dance, and it's really all about making sure that not just that there are things that are in this city that are at the table that are authentic and Black, but that there's actually encouraging Black leadership in the arts also to really talk about and really start to make some real deep conversations about the kind of cultural aggression that goes on in all oppressed cultures where what we have, other people make money off of.
Right, absolutely. And so that's April 14th through the 22nd.
Yes. And do you have the information of the website and number to call there?
Well, I have www.langstonarts.org as the website.
Okay, and let me give another one if you don't. www.langstonblackfilms.org. You can also call Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center, 684-4758. Tickets are now on sale at Brown Paper Tickets. I need to let the audience know that you can get an all pass for everything, which includes everything that's in the festival. Opening night is $20 and closing night is $20, but everything else in between for $75. It's a great deal, and it's also a way to really support what's taking place in this incredible festival that is known locally, nationally, and now internationally. It's really taking leaps and bounds. We should all be proud of it. It's got a following of between 800 and 1,100 people that come to this festival.
That's
and it started out as a weekend with like 7 films and 60 people. So we can tell there's a need for it. And again, as I said, this is Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center. We're doing great work down there, and we're just reaching out and saying,
Well, you're doing great work, and you've been doing great work for years. And I want to thank you for being on Urban Forum Northwest.
Thank you.
Jackie Musco, and we're going to move on to our next guest. Have a great festival, and I'm going to definitely come down and check things out, and you take good care of yourself.
I will. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, you are listening to Urban Forum Northwest. I'm your host, Kevin Henry. Next up on the line, we're going to talk about a march, which is happening tomorrow, I believe, for Trayvon Martin. And on the line, we have Reverend Lim Charleston. And we're talking about the Martin Luther King Jr. County Justice for Trayvon Martin Committee March happening tomorrow. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for having us.
Oh, thank you for being on. And so what time is the march? And give me some more details as far as where people should go and where people should meet, et cetera.
Well, everyone's going to meet at 19th and Madison up near Mount Zion Baptist Church. And then we're going to march down to the Westlake Center. The march will be starting at the gathering at about 3 p.m. there at 19th and Madison.
And so, this is one of these questions that I don't mean to be silly, but some people say, well, no, why should I go down there? What is the purpose of this march and what is it going to accomplish? So in your mind, why is it important that people participate in something like this?
Well, something like this is it's brought to national attention because there are laws on the books that don't necessarily benefit everyone. This law here was actually a conduit to a heinous crime. Mm-hmm. You have a man who shot a teenager child, killed him.
The stand your ground law is what you're talking about, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Stand your ground law. It doesn't make the application of it is out of order, and everyone that says it's out of order. But the folks down in Florida believe it's going to take at least a year for the state attorney general to decide on what way to go. Mm-hmm. Now, we have a law in this state similar to that. It doesn't state the same thing, but as citizens, it's time that we actually stand up for our own rights. We elect politicians to voice our opinions, but there hasn't been a whole lot of sentiment from politicians that I've seen on this. And what we want to do is let the politicians know that you're supposed to represent us. The laws that you make should keep us safe, even if it's from our own selves. We have a horrible example where a young man lost his life behind a law that nobody was happy with in the first place. Mm-hmm. And if enough of us can present ourselves, because a lot of politicians don't really see you as individuals sometimes. A lot of them just see you as constituents and votes. And what we as a people have to learn and understand is we can vote them in and we can vote them out. It is all right. If they don't necessarily represent what we would like to see done in our communities, they have no business representing us.
Mm-hmm. Well, so, I mean, I think that was very well said. After the march is over, do you have like a certain plan, or is there some type of follow-up that's done? And are you expecting or hoping that a certain amount of media cover the event?
Well, we've been looking at the media coverage and the type of media coverage that we've been getting. Some of it's been skewed, some of it's been inaccurate. So what we plan to do is to have our own media coverage. We have an outlet called YouTube and Facebook and things of that nature, so that when we present our march to the general public, they'll be able to see it as it really is. They won't have a commentator guesstimating or estimating or downplaying or minimizing the efficacy of the march. They'll be able to see and understand it. The regular folks will be able to see and understand it on social media, regular social media that we have. You'll have an accurate outcry, and it might inspire somebody else to do something else.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm hoping for good weather, and just if you could just give out the location, and do people need a phone number, or is it just pretty much just kind of show up at a certain time?
We would like you to be at 19th and Madison at about 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. Mm-hmm. We're going to peacefully, quietly, orderly march down to the Westlake Center. We're going to stay in league with the family's wishes, which will be purposeful, peaceful, and polite. Mm-hmm. It's not a kumbaya, quiet and hold hands and candle thing. We're actually praying for justice. Mm-hmm. We want justice done in this. Everybody knows what justice looks like in this case. We would like to at least see it initiated, because it's not even been initiated yet.
Right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking about this issue, and hopefully, this issue will stay in the forefront of both the minds of people and society as well as the media, because as I was saying to an earlier guest, sometimes I was talking to Bonnie Glenn, in fact, sometimes these things happen and people get all excited and start marching, and then they forget about it till the next time it happens, when it should be really an ongoing type of mindset. I want to thank you very much for being on the show, Reverend Lynn Charleston. Take care. Hope to talk to you again. I want to also thank my guests, Jackie Muskell and Bonnie Glenn, Fancy Frenchwood, Audrey Godwin, and of course, my esteemed producer, Eric Ryder. This has been Urban Forum Northwest. I've been your host, Kevin Henry. Have a nice day.